Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. All right, listen now. We're going to talk about hemp. So this is the fun side of cannabis. I don't think anybody really knew that. So no memos. Okay, thank you. One person. I'll take it. I'll take it. My name is Faye Coleman. I will be your moderator today. We're going to talk about the business of New Jersey hemp. I have a very distinguished panel here that you guys may or may not know. Brett Goldman from OCAN Group, and we've got Matt Bruce from Herbal Vibes with two Z's, as I understand, right? Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect, perfect. We're going to jump into it, but really this is for you guys. We often talk about cannabis in all forms, but I think what we do is we miss flipping the cannabis coin over and really talking about hemp in everything that the hemp side of the coin has to offer. So you're going to hear from some experts today, some folks that are in the business, some folks that are growing, and just understanding at a high level what we're going to get into with regards to hemp. So today we're going to talk about the 2023 Farm Bill. Did you even know that was coming? Delta 8. So I can't wait to hear a little bit on that. Farming in New Jersey, what does that look like? Where are we with that? Standards, resources, more to come around all of that. The first thing I want to do is talk about the hemp market. And I don't know if you guys know this or not. We talk about cannabis, where we're at, 26 billion, 33 by the end of this year, all that fun stuff. But the hemp market is here and it's moving forward. We're expecting to be about 6 billion in sales by the end of 22. Not so bad for the industry. Global sales around 27 billion by 2025. So there is an upward trajectory as it relates to hemp in and of itself. So I just wanted to set the stage because there is a couple of things that I want to make sure everybody knows. It's nothing like setting the table. So a couple of things I want you to think about as we talk about medicine, as we talk about industrial hemp, as we talk about CBD, all those things are running around in your head in terms of where's the value? Where can I be a part of this business? Does it make sense for me? Or do I just get back on the tried and proven path of the cannabis side of the business? Before we get into that, though, what I want to do is I want to take a moment to introduce my panel, and then we're going to get into some questions in terms of some things that they're doing that I trust me will be noteworthy. And then we're going to speak a little bit more about some specifics. And when I interject, it's going to be more on a commercial level. So is that okay with everybody? Yeah, okay, this is the interactive portion. Is that, you ask a question mark behind, and you go, yes, that works. Is that okay with everybody? Thank you. I appreciate you guys very much. So I first want to introduce Brett Goldman of OCAN Group. Brett, if you can give us a moment, just about 60 seconds in terms of who you are, what you bring to the table today.
Sure. So Brett Goldman, I'm a partner at OCAN Group. We consult in the cannabis space, both on the hemp and marijuana side. I've been in the cannabis industry for over 8 years now. I was one of the founders of a company called GenCanna. We were at one point one of the largest producers of hemp and CBD in the world. Consult on a number of issues around the country and around the world, working on stuff here in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, New York, and also internationally, working on cannabis legalization in Morocco. They're about to be the first Arab country to legalize cannabis. I'm part of the working group with the Association of Food and Drug Officials to put together a federal regulatory framework, and I'm also the chair of the NJCBA Hemp Committee.
Thank you very much, Brett. Appreciate that. Matt.
Hi, my name is Matthew Bruce. I'm the CEO of Herbal Vibes Z LLC, as well as Herbal Vibes. That's my hemp and my cannabis businesses. We are currently one of the first ones licensed to grow hemp in New Jersey. I'm also licensed in Pennsylvania as well, and I will soon be licensed to grow hemp in Guyana, South America. That's about me.
I'm sorry, say that one more time. OCAN Group, OCAN Group.
Herbal Vibes. It's HERBALZYBZ.
Excellent. Thank you guys very much. I appreciate that. We're going to jump right in because, as you can see, these guys are very experienced in their fields. They bring a lot of knowledge to the table. What I want to do is first talk about, and I'm going to throw this question to you, Brett. Can you give us a sense of what the 2023 Farm Bill will look like? We've had 2018. We know we've gone a number of years from there and what it has brought to us to the table. But what can we expect?
Yeah. So for background for the audience, I was intimately involved in the development of the hemp language in the 2018 Farm Bill, which legalized the production of hemp and put that under the USDA and called on the FDA to put forward regulations for downstream products, which they still have not done yet. The 2018 Farm Bill, the most important thing that we did in the 2018 Farm Bill was include the word cannabinoid in the definition of hemp. It's very important, but it's also created the situation that we're in right now, where you have a secondary market of illicit products that are being sold as legal. We're going to get into the Delta 8 and other isomers a little bit later in the discussion. But, the 2023 Farm Bill, it's still a little bit early, in terms of the language will probably come out in the early part of 2023. But what's expected is that the THC limit for hemp will move from 0.3 to either 0.6 or 1%. There's been a number of initiatives over the last 4 years now to increase that THC threshold. Hasn't happened because of the pandemic and because of many other reasons, but we expect that's gonna happen in the next Farm Bill. And also, the loophole for intoxicating cannabinoids is expected to be closed. I don't know what that's going to look like yet, but all of the conversations around the 2023 Farm Bill indicate that we're going to see Delta 8 and other isomers be moved into a more regulated market or taken off the market totally.
Well, I think that's quite interesting, especially as we know one of the main categories of cannabis is the growth of the edibles category, which includes beverages. So as we look at the introduction of CBD into alcoholic beverages, I think that will be something of interest, as we move forward. Any thoughts on that, Brett?
Yeah, I mean, the issue of food and beverages, and specifically CBD and other cannabinoid ingredients in food and beverages, is something that's a holdover from the 2018 Farm Bill. When Congress passed the 2018 Farm Bill, there was an expectation that the FDA would create a pathway for CBD and other cannabinoids into food, beverages, and dietary supplements as it was being sold anyway. That still hasn't happened yet. So it's unclear if they're going to explicitly allow for that or take the language from HR 841, which would allow for CBD to be used as a dietary supplement ingredient. And I think they may have taken food and beverage out of that at this point. But it's hard to say. But look, it's happening. I mean, you're starting to see a proliferation of cannabinoid-based drinks on the market, whether we're talking about in the regulated market in dispensaries or outside of the regulated market, coming from hemp-derived Delta 9 or or inclusion of other cannabinoids in that. So it's a very confusing and messy time right now for both sides of the industry.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Matt, I'm going to switch gears over to you because, within the state of New Jersey, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but we've got about 45 license holders in terms of hemp growers within the state, and it is declining over the years. We've got about 200 acres that are being grown on. So we're not trending in the right direction. But here we have someone that is actually in the field and doing his own thing. So now tell me, how are you moving forward in this space? What are your plans to grow, and what does that look like as you go into 23?
So, well, first I'll explain how this year went. We had 4 registered properties. Obviously, I had plans on growing on all 4 of them, but life got the best of me. We were able to grow on one property. The one property had about 1,500 plants, and I had 5 different strains: Hawaiian Haze, Forbidden V, Pink Panther, CBG White, and Peach Goliath. Those are all CBD and CBD strains. So currently in harvesting stage right now. So moving on to your question, I'm going to be pivoting away, a little more away from the CBD and CBG strains, focusing on industrial and trying to understand the fiber and the grain strains. So we're trying to move into the industrial side of things.
I so appreciate that. You know, if you couldn't read these slides, you would swear like, okay, I'm channeling you right now. I appreciate that, Matt, because there's a couple things I do want to talk about. CBD as relates to alcohol that Brett just mentioned a moment ago in terms of is there an opportunity for infusion? What will that look like? How do we move forward with it? There's been some things on the medical front that have been discovered in terms of the antioxidants within CBD and how it actually helps to impact the effects of liver damage. So there's more to come on this side, guys. I guess, you know, I don't know if anybody's as excited as I am, but I think we're just on the leading edge in terms of finding out all of the medical research in terms of how the cannabis plant can help us, especially on the CBD side. So there's more to come with regard to that. I do want to talk, so, you know, of course, Matt goes into the industrial side. So, of course, we all understand the climate change, right? Earlier this year in June, Pakistan got hit with wild floods, right? And devastation, deaths were amongst us significantly, and that was in June. And then what happened? Hurricane Ian came through, right, and hit Florida in the southeast in total. It came up all the way through Virginia and hit us just in October. You know, so when we start to talk about some of the significance of these weather events that are less occurring over a significant period of time and more like how significant they are in this moment in time. They said they hadn't seen an event like that in Florida since 1935. You know, so people are like, well, I can remember a couple events. No, not since 1935. So it's been pretty significant out here. So when you talk about hemp, industrial hemp, Matt is absolutely right. You know, there's a shift of everyone in terms of what they're growing right now, going from CBD, which we all know that CBD is dramatically reduced in price per pound. So people are looking at it from an avenue of revenue generation to maybe a shift toward industrial hemp where there's more opportunity. You know, Black farmers that are in the space, how they've been impacted, how can they jump into this business as well, and what does that look like for them? And what does, you know, industrial hemp do for us? You know, people talk about it in terms of soil amendments. You're looking at graphene. You're looking at filtration for water. There's so much that we're doing on that end, as well as developing hemp curriculum for various HBCUs that's going on currently today. So there's a lot that's actually happening. And of course, we go to the tried and true hempcrete. You know, I think that's the starting point, but there's so much more that industrial hemp has to offer. So I'm excited to hear when Matt shares, you know, what's going on the industrial hemp side, because we do have to reduce our carbon emissions. And, you know, everybody thinks that that's like a slogan these days, but really it's, you know, an immediate need. And then we got to look at the Black farmers that are out there. We've gone from in 1920 to having 1 million Black farmers to less than 50,000 today. That's significant. We need to take note of that. But there is available funding, and not just for Black farmers, for everybody. In terms of, if you don't know, in the tax bill that got passed earlier this year, they snuck in $2 billion for climate sustainability resources. That can include hemp. So as you guys are thinking about what can happen, give thought to that because, you know, it's significant. They've got, and I'm going to throw it back to you in a second, Brett, because I want you to tee us up on the Delta 8 piece, because I think as we're talking broadly, we need to also talk about specifically how we're being impacted by some of the, I call it operating in between the lines of how we're moving forward in this industry. But you've got something called the Climate Smart Commodities Grant, which is a $1 billion grant that got launched early this year, and the SAS grant, or the Sustainabilities Grant. Both those grants can help you on the industrial hemp side. So if you're really looking to grow, like Matt is talking about here and shifting gears, that's another area that you can absolutely go into. But I'm going to shift gears back to you, Brett, because I do want to hear about this Delta 8. That's some, now it just feels like it becomes more of a sinister note every time it's being heard. So give us the details in terms of what it is and where we're going with it.
Yeah. Wow. So that's a very long-winded introduction to the question. So I think we have to actually start back to why farmers are shifting from floral hemp and cannabinoid farming to industrial. There was an overproduction of hemp in 2019. Farmers around the country flocked to the idea of a new crop, and rightfully so. Hemp presented a really great opportunity for farmers across the country, whether we're talking about black farmers or white farmers or tobacco farmers or whoever. Everybody wanted in on the idea that, hey, we're going to produce cannabis outdoors. And that's great. And that hopefully will come back at some point in the future. But what happened was that all of these farmers across the country produced more hemp than had been grown in the U.S. in 3 generations. That led to an oversupply of biomass to go into the production of cannabinoids. So the price of CBD went from thousands of dollars a kilogram to, I think right now it's around $200 a kilogram. So a lot of companies, a lot of farmers, a lot of processors, a lot of downstream product manufacturers, what have you, started to feel the effects of that. I mean, that happened to my former company. So all of this stuff is hitting the market. The quality of CBD is varies at best. You can get some very high quality CBD. You can get some product that has CBD on the label and it's not CBD. That led to processors and extractors looking for new ways to make money. So they created bathtub gin. Delta 8 is nothing more than bathtub gin. You make Delta 8 through a conversion of CBD and turn that into Delta 9 THC, remove a piece of the chemistry from that, and it turns into Delta 8. So Delta 8 doesn't actually exist in nature in large quantities. It does exist in the plant, but at very, very minuscule levels. So if you see products that are out there that are, Delta 8 flower or whatever, I guarantee you it's not Delta 8 flower. It's probably leftover hemp biomass that is sprayed with Delta 8 distillate, and that's not really something that you want to be smoking or consuming. That also, when I talk about Delta 8, I'm also talking about other cannabinoids that are being sold on the market as legal, like THCO, like THCP, like HHC. HHC is a totally synthetic compound. I'd never heard of HHC until maybe a year ago. Delta 11, again, all of these things can be derived from CBD. Now the question is, where is that CBD coming from? Because CBD, the CBD that was produced in 2019 has probably started to, is probably not in existence anymore because it got, either turned into CBD products or has been converted into other isomers. So there's a possibility that it's being imported from China, it's coming from the black market or the illicit market, and I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole because I don't know what's in it. If you run some of these, if you run any of these Delta 8 products or isomerized cannabinoid products through an HPLC and look at what comes out on the chromatograph, you're going to see peaks that were previously unknown in nature. So stuff that's being sold as quote unquote legal actually has stuff that science didn't know about until maybe last week. So that presents a really dangerous situation for the consumer. And, at the end of the day, we should be here to talk about consumer health and safety, which should be paramount to all, any discussion about cannabis. So yeah, I mean, that kind of got us here. And you'll find, especially through this discussion, that I'm probably one of the least bullish people on cannabis industry right now, because of these issues. We had an oversupply of hemp. We're gonna have an oversupply of marijuana, and that should scare everybody. And I don't mean to throw cold water on what should be a really positive event, but
Please talk to us more about that, though. Let's hear.
so. My perspective is based on my experience in the hemp industry over the last 8 years, and you have a situation right now where multiple states are in competition with one another for their medical marijuana programs or the recreational marijuana programs. It has to be contained in state. You have to produce it in state. Hemp is able to be sold across state lines, but marijuana is not. So, look at Pennsylvania, for example. I asked a question at the end of, I think, 2 panels ago, what are we doing about the oversupply? Well, the oversupply is going to happen everywhere, and that should be of great concern to everybody in the room. What are we going to do with these products? Why do we have an oversupply? And what's going to happen when the rest of the world starts producing cannabis? You talked about going to Guyana?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there are regions in the world, Guyana, Suriname, Morocco, Thailand, many places in East Africa that are producing cannabis right now at a fraction of the cost. And I mean, again, there's a wall of weed coming, people. Like they're able to reach levels of scale that we're not. It's cheaper. And it's cheaper. We have to do something here in terms of allowing for interstate commerce and taking the burden off of in the way that we're producing, the way that cannabis is being produced in states right now. Look at Canada, okay? Most of the Canadian companies, they're not making money. Publicly traded companies, not making money. They're spending significant resources on indoor cultivation in greenhouses, in warehouses, that many of them are being sold off for pennies on the dollar because there's no demand for it. It's much better to produce cannabis outdoors through hemp than it is to produce cannabis in greenhouses, but we can get to that later.
I love hearing that. I love hearing the outdoors versus the indoors. Because
the one really positive thing that I'll mention, because you brought up industrial uses. Hemp is a really resilient building material, and it just got included in the International Code Council's most recent update for 2023. So you can use hemp in construction, and that's awesome. But there's not enough demand yet for hempcrete, and there's not enough farmers producing at a scale where it's viable. So we've got a lot of problems to solve.
And Brett, you bring up a great point, because Matt, as you're looking to go into 2023, what are you seeing as your biggest challenges? Because you're a farmer.
I have so many things I wanted to respond to before I went on to that.
Feel free,
So
respond away.
Okay, so let me try to get to the responses, and then I'll come back to your question.
Perfect.
Before we move on. So I think the issue is, in Canada specifically, they legalized as a country, which allowed different types of things to go federally,
yeah.
right?
Federally.
And so right now in America, we have states legalizing it. The states are going to be oversaturated. So it seems like the opportunity is, as soon as the state becomes legal, you get set up, you get situated, and then eventually, maybe 2 or 3 years down the line, federally it's going to become legal, and then that's when everything is going to go out of proportion. So what do you think about that?
Totally disagree. I think
You
we're
disagree?
out of proportion already.
You think you're out of this?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're out of proportion already. I mean, there's oversupplies in several states. There is a situation where the illicit market is thriving. I think, I'm looking at my notes here, I think it's like $400 billion next year is what the projection is. $400 billion globally. So that means that whatever's in the regulated market right now is not meeting, there's not a demand for it. The demand is coming from where consumers are going to get a quality product, and clearly something's missing in the regulated market for them to, continue to go back to the illicit market.
So speaking on New Jersey specifically, we haven't gotten started yet, right?
Right.
So we
Yeah.
still have about a year to 2 years before it goes crazy. Would you agree with that?
I think it went crazy already. I mean, look at the look at the Bloomberg article last month. There was an article in Bloomberg talking about buying cannabis in dispensaries here in New Jersey, and you have mold issues, you have contaminant issues. That shouldn't be happening.
Yeah, I'll jump in here.
Full stop.
But I'll
That
jump
shouldn't
in
be
here,
happening.
Brett, on that, because on the mold issues, interestingly enough, unfortunately, we do have some of the primary growers today having those mold issues because the demand is significant right now. And because that demand is significant, right, we're cutting corners, we're being a little bit more efficient with our processes, and unfortunately it's costing us from a quality standpoint. So that is definitely something that's a challenge for us, that the new license holders will help us to mitigate, to Matt's point. So in terms of saturation on the cultivation side, yeah, of course we're far from that. We've got 70% of our municipalities who have opted out of cannabis, right? So right now we've got 30% in. We have a shortage on real estate. We have municipality overreach. And there's some issues within the state of New Jersey that we have to grapple with and resolve, that are both in the cannabis market as well as in the hemp market, as we're looking to develop a supply chain. And then how do we move forward with some confidence so that we can have more growers and something sustainable that we can move forward on?
Look, about a year and a half ago, there was a lot of discussion about interoperability between the hemp program and the cannabis program. Mm-hmm. And this is something that is happening across the country. There are a number of states that are trying to do it right. And I say trying to do it right because you have an issue of just there's not enough hemp farmers, or there's, processors are not interested. Mm-hmm. But being able to grow a crop as a farmer, as a hemp farmer, and sell that to a processor, whether that's a hemp processor or a marijuana processor, and use that as an ingredient. This is like it's a no-brainer to me, and it should be reflected in our regulatory framework. It's not at the moment. I know the CRC is open to that, but the CRC also has a monumental job of just regulating cannabis as a whole. Yes. But if you're a hemp farmer in New Jersey or any state, really, you should be able to sell that crop to a marijuana processor, and they can use that in extracts or isolates, or I've even heard in Pennsylvania they're using it in some smokables. So it's not. There are still things that we can do to alleviate this, but we're Train left a while ago.
The train did leave the station a while ago. You're 100% correct. And, I applaud programs like Stockton in terms of what Stockton's doing. They've got the Chris program right now that they are lifting up, which will really help us on the cannabis as well as the hemp side. But it is a grassroots program, to your point, Brett, that is not a statewide understanding of how we'll move forward with cannabis on both sides of the coin. So it is an issue because we've somewhat stalled on the hemp side, and then we are out of the box in a very, some might say big way, some might say chaotic way, but we're out. So, with that, we've got to understand how we're going to collaborate and come together to make certain we can lift both sides of the coin and have a sustainable business. That also helps to focus on the climate a little bit. I have to keep throwing that in. But as you hear from these two gentlemen here, you hear they're speaking in the same frame, but on in two different paths and seeing things from two different perspectives. And I think it's important for you guys to understand that, because as you look to jump into this business, you got to understand there's some challenges, there's some risk. You can be out of business tomorrow if you don't really understand how regulation is moving forward, how the industry is moving forward, the potential market, your business. Can you even get your business off the ground? So, these are some of the initiatives and thoughts that we want to bring to the table, just so you guys can take a step back and give thought to make sense of what makes sense for you. Matt,
can you repeat that question for me?
Again, so as we look at going into 23, no worries. What concerns you most? Because, your boots on the ground. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, as Brett's mentioned, I do realize that there is an oversaturation and a problem, but I had projected it out a couple years out. So my issue was realizing that there's already an oversaturation in the CBD side, the CBG side. So now I had to quickly switch, which I tried to do this year, but I had to focus on the operation. I had to switch into understanding industrial, understanding how to change my business structure into figuring out hempcrete and figuring out how we're going to implement this into construction basis. So my worry, I can't really say worry, because it's a business problem we have to face, is to understand how to transition from the medicinal into the industrial side of things. That's really what I'm focusing on. So.
Excellent. Brett, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I mean, look, going into the new year, as I've mentioned, I've got plenty of concerns, but I think it's time, and it's overdue. We're overdue for a federal regulatory framework that takes all of cannabis into account. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about we already have existing pathways at the federal level to regulate most of this stuff. We have an industrial pathway. That's pathway number one that we need, an industrial pathway. Industrial for hemp fiber, hemp building materials, animal feed, etc. Pathway number two, consumer packaged goods. This is pretty simple. Cannabinoids or hemp, hemp protein and fiber and whatever in food, beverages, and dietary supplements. These pathways already exist. You have a number of producers that are getting, for the last couple of years now, have received GRAS certification, generally recognized as safe for CBD and hemp protein and hemp seed. So there's, this pathway exists. Third pathway, psychotropic. This is new. This is something that we don't have at the federal level, but we can easily replicate from many of the states that already are doing this. And then the fourth pathway is pharmaceutical. And again, this is something that already exists at the federal level. So really, we're not reinventing the wheel. We're just creating we're creating something new for psychotropic cannabis. How realistic is this? I don't know. If you told me that, I'd still be talking about the fact that the FDA has not come out with any kind of regulation for CBD by 2022, almost 2023. I would have thought you were crazy back in 2018, but here we are almost 5 years later, 4 years later, and we're still having these conversations. And the people that are suffering the most are farmers and processors and folks that are trying to do the right thing and get into this industry and produce safe products, and they can't.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Hear exactly what's being communicated, guys, because this is where we are right now.
Sorry, Faye, can I say one other thing?
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
And with regards to fiber and industrial materials for hemp, there is a knowledge gap that exists in the U.S. right now. There's a huge knowledge gap. There are, I'm aware of, companies that have received grants and received, funding from the federal government to study this stuff and learn how to do it right. I'm aware of maybe 3 or 4 companies that can actually process fiber, hemp fiber, and know how to do that at scale. If we're going to be competitive, we have to be able to scale this stuff. So,
No.
Can I touch on something?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So just to respond to you, we have the United States Hemp Building Association. So I was just appointed as the regional leader for Region 9,
Oh, nice.
which is New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. So I just recently got on the board, but they've been doing a great amount of the work, implementing hempcrete into code and things like that. So as far as New York standpoint, they have a hemp house that's been built. They have a processor that they're working with. So I'm trying to take that and explode it in Region 9 at least, and get Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and the rest of the states in my region on board, and figure out who's planting, who's cultivating, who's processing, and kind of get this up and publicize it, because it's really a gap, as you're mentioning.
I don't think it's a matter of getting folks on board, because across the industry there's a lot of excitement about it. I think it's closing the gap between the enthusiasm and what's actually
real life.
What's real and what they're capable of. Mm-hmm. Because look, I know of thousands of pounds of fiber that are sitting in Kentucky that was produced in 2018 that still can't be processed.
I agree with you, Brett, wholeheartedly.
And if we're talking so much about the promise of hemp, yes, there is a great deal of promise when it comes to hemp, but there's also, a lot of work has been done, and then it just kind of stopped because the FDA didn't do their job. And had the FDA come out with regulations when they were supposed to in 2019, we could have seen a market for all of that CBD that was produced, and then there would be a need to grow more.
No,
But,
I agree with you.
yeah.
And I would also like just to add to that, as you talk about CBD and from a growth standpoint, so let's break the supply chain down a little bit. You look at CBD from a growth standpoint, very expensive to grow. If you don't know, it is quite costly to grow, where industrial hemp is the reverse of that. But fast forward and look at processing, right? You've got on the cannabis side of the coin, processing very expensive, not much floor space required for it. But on the hemp side, very expensive processing, and some significant floor space required for it. So, it comes down to Brett's point and Matt's, as you're looking at the supply chain, we are still very light on supply chain because there's some high parameters from a cost standpoint, the capital that's required to get us to that next stage, right? So we do have some grants that are out there that will help facilitate some of that, more so on the growth side. But there's some opportunities on other sides, but it's still very grassroots in terms of who's pulled the trigger and spent the millions of dollars for the technology that they've put forward on the processing end, which gets you to the product development that you're looking for within the industry.
Faye, can
okay.
I'd like to just clarify something that Faye's talking about when we're talking about processing. So in the context of floral hemp, and this is not in the context of industrial materials, but in the context of floral hemp, you have a bottleneck that exists from when the plant comes out of the field, when it's at 60% moisture content, to getting it to drying it. So you can't just take a hemp plant or any cannabis plant out of the field and smoke it or use it for extracts or whatever. You have to get it to a point where it's you have to dry it. So across the country, the traditional method of drying has been hang and dry. So you hang it in your barn, and it dries. If you're going to scale it, it's not efficient at a certain level of scale. When I was at Gincana, we had the ability to take plants from the field and take it from 60% moisture content to less than 10% moisture content in under 3 minutes. We had a flash drying system.
Nice.
That was not the standard, and is still not the standard throughout the industry. So you have farmers across the country that produced hemp for CBD and use the hang and dry method. When you use the hang and dry method, if you're not careful, you're going to lose all the value from your plants because the trichomes will fall off and just end up on the floor and end up in the dustbin. So it's really important to understand that the way the supply chain looks when we're talking about from genetics and cultivation to end finished goods, the processing it's so important to be able to do that properly, because that also is what gets us into a situation where you have products that don't actually meet what's on the label. The extraction process is a very complex thing. Like I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to sit here and explain how CO2 extraction works, but it's complex, and you have to be able to maintain quality and maintain your quality control through that process.
And then
Yes.
Brett, let me just ask you
Yeah.
this. So, and then I'm going to come back to you, Matt, as well, because we are short on time, and I know that we're getting into it. We're going to get into the weeds. Did I say that? Okay. We're going to get into the weeds on a couple of things, but I want to just pull it back for a second because we only have a couple minutes left from being given the sign here. But I do want you guys to finish with a final point that you might want to make to close out today. And I'm going to start with you, Matt.
A final point.
Anything you want to leave us with?
Sure. Well, firstly, I would like to thank Stockton University, specifically Professor Rob, for giving me an opportunity.
Did you go here?
No, I didn't,
Okay.
actually. Yeah. Giving me an opportunity, seeing a vision in my business and allowing me to work with the university. I have 3 interns in the what is that called? The audience out there. So I'm grateful to have them involved, and my cousin as well, in this hemp operation. And as I mentioned, I'm moving forward into a different direction in the industrial scene, and hopefully I can make this happen and get hempcrete into the communities. That's me.
Thank you. Brett?
Final thoughts. Well, of course, thank you, Stockton University, for inviting me to participate. Look, folks, there's a wall of weed coming, and there is a overproduction coming. It's not going to be pretty. We saw it happen in the hemp industry. We saw it happen in the hemp industry in 2019. The same thing is going to happen for marijuana. I can't be certain when or how, but it's coming. The rest of the world continues to run circles around what we're doing here in the U.S. If you look at places like Morocco, Thailand, Latin America, South America, they're going to do it bigger and cheaper than we can. And we have to be prepared for that. We also have to continue to push our federal government on the need for a regulatory framework that takes into account existing pathways and allows for interstate commerce and product development, and product development from industrial materials to consumer packaged goods to psychotropic products to pharmaceutical products. If we had that, there would be ample reason to produce cannabis everywhere in the country all the time. But until we're able to meet that demand, we're up against we've got some hurdles to overcome. I still am, I still think cannabis is an incredibly positive. Cannabis is great. I love cannabis. Been using cannabis for 20 years, and find it very helpful. But We still have to continue to, explore the medical benefits, explore the science. And the most important thing that everybody in this room needs to remember is know where your product comes from. Know what's in it, know who makes it, and make sure that it's safe, because there's a lot of, excuse my language, there's a lot of crap out there, and people are getting sick, and we're seeing increased calls to poison control. We're seeing increased calls to, we're continuing to see enforcement from federal regulators, but know where your products come from. Know that it's safe, and make sure that it comes from a safe producer. If you're unsure about something, take it to a lab. I'm pretty sure most labs would be happy to test test some weed. And remember, there's a reason why the black market's continuing to thrive. And I'll leave it at that.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
One more thing.
Just one more thing. If anyone's interested in internships, as I mentioned, I have my hemp department and the pending cannabis department. So if you guys would like to see live hemp plants or any of the cultivation process, just find me and let me know, and we'll connect.
That is fantastic. Thank you guys so very much.
I am registered in 4 farms in New Jersey, so we can talk offline.
Yeah, and you guys can actually see their email addresses are over my shoulder right here, so feel free to reach out to any of them. Yeah, you guys didn't realize I put those up. But I did. So you guys can follow up with each of those. We thank you guys for the time today. One thing I did want to add is that, as you see programs like Stockton, I think Brett and Matt make an excellent point. Educate, educate, educate. Starts with that. So programs like Stockton, organizations like U.S. Hemp Association, the National Hemp Association, there's a number of organizations out there, NJ Cannabis Insider to get your news. Those things are going to help facilitate directionally how you move forward in this industry. And of course, there's the network, they're your peers that are out there that can also help you through this. And as we continue to build the supply chain, look out for the New Jersey Cannabis Business Association, of which Brett and myself are both on the Hemp Policy Committee. So, I appreciate your time. I appreciate my panelists' time today. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you guys, and hopefully learn a little bit more in terms of New Jersey business of hemp. Thank you.
I think there was a question from the audience.
Oh, was there a question? Do we have time for one question, Rob? I'm sorry.
Yeah, if you can repeat it so everybody can hear it, otherwise I have to use the mic.
Okay, sure.
Was there a question from the audience? I thought I saw somebody raising their hands, but
Did I say a question?
it's really hard to see.
Maybe just a yawn? Okay, we got it. Thank you guys very much.
Cool.